Hello everybody, Martin Radner here from Radner Law Group, bringing you trial analysis. Today we're going to be jumping into the Jessy Kurczewski murder trial, also referred to as the eye drop murder trial. And this is a trial that's been going on for a little while. I haven't watched everything, so don't cut my head off if I say something that you saw some other testimony or evidence that disputes it. You can let me know in the comments respectfully, but I'm going to give you the little bit that I jumped into and I saw things that stuck out of my mind. And I think here what's very interesting in this case is that we've got some pretty strong arguments on both sides. We got some strong arguments by the prosecution. They laid out a very nice case, and you've got also some pretty strong arguments by the defense. And I think actually it may just come down to one piece of evidence, which may be the determining factor in this case. Now, of course, you never know what the jury's thinking, but just looking at it from my view, it could possibly come down to one piece of evidence that will determine the fate of Jessy Kurczewski in this case. Before we jump into it, please, if you haven't subscribe, like the video so we can continue growing and bringing more people this important analysis that you're not going to get from any other place. So just to give a little bit of background, what happened over here, we have Lynn Hernon, who's the victim here, and she was either murdered or she committed suicide on October 3rd, 2019, only at 62 years old, tragically, still very young. And now they are charging Jessy Kurczewski with her murder. And they're charging her with 3 different counts. They're charging her with a first-degree murder count and also 2 theft counts. And the theft is actually connected with the murder because it seems that would have been the motive for Jessy Kurczewski to have murdered Lynn Hernon. So where does everybody connect? Where do all the relationships start? So here we go. We've got Lynn Hernon, the victim here, had a very close friend named Jennifer Flowers. She has a very close friend, Jennifer Flowers, who also has a daughter. Jennifer Flowers' daughter is Jessy Kurczewski. And Lynn Hernon did not have any children of her own, and she kind of adopted Jessy Kurczewski. She became very, very close, the same way she was very close with Jennifer Flowers, her good friend. Now she's also became very close, like an adopted daughter of Jessy Kurczewski. So she also had some other friends, but there was no question about it that her very, very, very close friend was Jennifer Flowers, along with her daughter, Jessy Kurczewski, who ended up caring for Lynn Hernon later on in her life before she actually was either murdered or committed suicide. Now, she also had another close friend who, her name was Corrine, and Corrine had a son, Anthony, and she became close with Anthony as well. Anthony also seemed to be somewhat of an unofficial adopted son. So you've got Anthony and Jessy, who are both acting as though they're Lynn's children, and Lynn becomes so close with them that she actually puts them both as beneficiaries on her will. So the estate would be split 50-50 between Jessy and Anthony. Now, another part of this case, actually, interestingly, is the fact that Lynn is a cat lover. She loves her cats. And that's going to play a very significant role because when Jessy was asked initially by detectives, do you feel that this was a suicide or not? Jessy's first response was that she doesn't really know. And she kind of said a comment that she doesn't think that Lynn would have left her cats. That's how connected Lynn was with her cats, that Jessy suggested that she wouldn't even commit suicide because she was so connected to her cats. Another interesting thing about Lynn is that she hated technology, which is really an anomaly in today's generation. Everyone is connected so deeply to their technology, their phones, their laptops, their iPads, their iPhones. Everyone's connected very strongly to the technology, while Lynn had nothing. She was not interested in technology. In fact, the only cell phone that she had was a flip phone that was not a smartphone, and she didn't have a computer, and she used to pay for things in cash or call up and make transfers just like the old way, before we got all these apps to take care of our bills and things like that. So she had no apps and nothing like that. Now that's significant because the prosecution suggests that the reason that Lynn had no idea what Jessy was really doing behind her back was because she didn't have all this access, this easy access to her account information by just opening up an app and checking her account balance or looking at her credit cards or things like that. And therefore, Lynn was oblivious to a lot of the actions that they claim Jessy was doing behind her back. Now, how did she die? How did Lynn die? Well, the defendant in this case, Jessy Kurczewski, admitted that she gave Lynn a bottle of water that she knew to be spiked with Visine. Visine is the eye drops in this case, and in fact, in that bottle of water that Jessy gave to Lynn, it actually had 6 bottles of Visine eye drops in it. In Visine is a chemical called tetrahydrozoline. Tetrahydrozoline apparently could poison a person if they ingest enough of that. But did she know that it was going to kill her? Did Jessy know that by giving this bottle spiked with this Visine to Lynn, and Lynn would drink it, did she know that it would kill her? And the answer, according to the prosecution, is yes. She knew that, and she even said that she was sick because she knew by giving her that bottle of water, it could kill her, and that made her sick, and she admitted to that. Now, she was also another motive that she was going to be the personal representative of Lynn's estate, and that's why to the prosecution, the way that they framed this is that Lynn to Jessy was going to be more valuable when she was dead than she was alive. And that's why Jessy just wanted her to be killed, murdered. Now, the medical examiner in this case, also a very interesting part of this case, the medical examiner could not immediately determine what happened here. Remember, the medical examiner has to determine 2 things: the manner of death and the cause of death. What actually caused her to die, and what manner, and in which manner did this death occur? Was it a homicide? Was it a suicide? Was it an accident? What was it? So the medical examiner, it took her months to come to her conclusion that this was a homicide. And not only was it homicide, but it took her months to come to the conclusion that the cause of death was actually tetrahydrozoline poisoning because of the Visine eye drops. It took her months, and she had to do a lot of research. She also opined, this is the medical examiner, she opined that she thought that the crime scene looked staged. If you look at the picture of the crime scene, there's a chair there, and next to the chair they have these empty pills, these bottles of pills that are empty, and there's a bottle of water next to that. And she thinks, the medical examiner, that was all staged by somebody, by the murderer, and in this case would be Jessy. It was all staged by Jessy. This was the medical examiner's opinion. And part of the reason is that she felt that when people commit suicide, they don't leave those empty bottles of pills around. I guess they just take the pills and put them away. They don't have them all laying out next to a chair. That was part of the suggestion by the prosecution in this case. Now, she does admit, the medical examiner does admit that she had a lot of other drugs in her system, but ultimately she came to the conclusion that the tetrahydrozoline was the actual chemical that poisoned her. Now, there's a number of thefts that are alleged in this case also that Jessy's being charged with. The first theft is really the theft that occurred while Lynn was alive, and that comes down to 28 checks that were written from Lynn to Jessy. So Jessy is the recipient of these checks. They're written out to Jessy, and Lynn is signed on these checks. And they equal the amount of close to $145,000, which does not include even another $30,000 loan and the fact that Lynn's credit cards were all of a sudden being maxed out. And something else that's interesting is that Jessy, with her regular job, or with a legitimate job that her occupation, she was making close to $50,000, but she was spending close to $500,000. So a very big discrepancy, and she needed to come up with that money somehow, at least some way to pay for some of her expenses of $500,000. So they're claiming, the prosecution, that Jessy wrote all these checks to herself, and that's how she was starting to pay all this debt, and she really forged them all, and this is all behind Lynn's back. And this is when Lynn was still alive. So that's theft number 1. Theft number 2, they argue, is that after Lynn died, then we know that the estate's supposed to be split 50-50 with Jessy and Anthony, and Jessy started taking money out of the estate just taking money out without even speaking to Anthony, without giving him any portion of it. She just started taking all the money out herself. Now, another interesting part of this case is the boyfriend. Jessy has a boyfriend named Scott Craig. And Scott Craig heard from Jessy that Lynn, her mother, or not her real mother, but the person who acts like her mother, Lynn, was very sick, and he was under the impression that she was actually in a coma for many months before she actually died. And what's interesting is that Jessy had a conversation with her boyfriend, Scott Craig, and in one point of her conversation, at one point in time, she ingested or must have ingested tetrahydrozoline, and she was very nervous because she knew at the time that this chemical can kill her. And she was talking to her boyfriend, Scott, about this, that she ingested this, and she's nervous that she's going to die. Now that happened before she spoke to detectives, and when the detectives, this was before the determination of the medical examiner that the tetrahydrozoline the poisoning was the agent that killed Lynn. So this conversation that she had with Scott was before that. And then she's talking to detectives after that conversation she had with her boyfriend, and the detectives tell her that the medical examiner determined that Lynn was poisoned by tetrahydrozoline, and Jessy pretends that she didn't even know that such a thing can kill, that tetrahydrozoline can kill anybody. So what happened there? How is she telling the boyfriend one thing that she knew about it, and then telling the detectives that she didn't even know that it can kill anybody? Then there's one big bombshell, which I feel is a bombshell, which may make the case for the prosecution. And that is that on Jessy's phone, they're able to look up, these experts can look through a person's phone, and they can even sometimes find information that was attempted to be deleted from the person's phone. And some of the documents that they were able to recover on Jessy's phone were documents about how to poison someone, or different agents in which to poison someone. So those type of searches, those type of documents were on Jessy's phone, and before the murder or suicide, and it was deleted. And then afterwards, she ended up dead. So that is a very strong point. Now, also another lie, and they keep trying to paint Jessy as a liar, that another lie that they tried to impute onto Jessy is that Jessy initially said that she wasn't sure if this was a suicide or not. And then after she's arrested, all of a sudden she was saying that Lynn has actually been acting suicidal for months before this death of Lynn. So the way the prosecution understands this case is that this is all just Jessy lying to try to cover her tracks. She was stealing from Lynn. She wanted Lynn dead, and she purposely gave Lynn this water that was spiked with a lethal dose of tetrahydrozoline. That's the prosecution's theory. Now, this sounds pretty strong, but the defense has also some pretty strong points. Number one, the defense said, is that the FBI is going to be looking at those 28 checks. Now, this is the prosecution's motive. Now, of course, the prosecution tells the jury that we don't have to prove motive, all we have to prove is intent, but essentially, that's really the motive in this case, that she was just stealing from her and taking all of her money, and she just wanted to continue stealing from her, and she wanted her dead. Now, the FBI agents, according to the defense, are going to say that you cannot determine whether these checks were forged or not. It's possible that Lynn actually wrote these checks and knew about it. And also, just because Lynn does not have an app to check her balance, do you think that she would not check her balance anyway? These people who don't want to use technology, they wouldn't go to the bank themselves. She was at the bank. The evidence is going to show that she was at the bank plenty of times. And at the bank, you ask for a balance all the time, or they even give you a paper that tells you your balance. And this is going on for months before her murder, and she never knew about what was going on with the balance of her bank accounts, and also the credit cards. You think that she had no idea what was going on with her credit cards at all? There's very easy ways, even if you don't want to be use apps and technology. I'm sure there's plenty of ways that people used to know. You know, get statements in the mail. They got plenty. There's very easy ways to find out your account balance. So don't just tell me that the fact that she did not yet like to use technology, that was the reason that she was not able to see what was going on. So this was all the defense arguments, that this was all, of course, with Lynn's authority. All of Jessy's spendings was all with Lynn's authority. And not only that, Lynn was on full disability, and she was even receiving food stamps. And Lynn did not want to lose her food stamps and her benefits. And she knew that if she has too much money, that it's possible the government will decide, you have too much money, we shouldn't be giving you food stamps, and they'll take away her food stamps. So in order to not lose her benefits, she knew exactly what she was doing. She was giving Jessy this money. And why would somebody give their daughter $145,000? People love their children. And if Lynn doesn't feel that she needs the money, and she loves Jessy with all her heart and soul, it's possible, it makes sense that she would want to give her the money. After all, she's getting her food stamps, she's getting her benefits, she can take care of herself, she has enough money. And this way she can also help her daughter, Jessy, out. So it's not crazy to believe that this was all with Lynn's authority. Now, also something is that Lynn also had vodka in her system. She liked to drink. So she had vodka. She also had Visine, as we spoke about, which was this tetrahydrozoline. She had that in her system. And, people like different drugs. The defense attorney says, I can understand why people want to smoke marijuana. I can understand why people want to do crack and cocaine and all these other types of drugs. People get into all types of weird stuff. I'm not here to judge. So what Lynn liked to also take as a drug was Visine, which has tetrahydrozoline in it. Now also something else that the medical examiner agreed to is that there was somewhere between 25 to 30 prescription pills in her system when she died. And do you know how many she was supposed to have in her system? 5 to 6. So the medical examiner is concluding, this is the medical examiner's conclusion, which this is such a strong point by the defense. The medical examiner is concluding that the 25 to 30 prescription pills were taken voluntarily by Lynn. She was not forced to take that. But just the Visine, which had the tetrahydrozoline, it was given to her in a drink, and she had no idea that she was doing it, and that was all from Jessy. How does that make sense? If she's taking these 25 to 30 pills, don't you think she would also take a swig of Visine also? How can you tell me with certainty, certainly beyond a reasonable doubt, that that's what happened here? That she voluntarily took the 25 to 30 prescription pills, which she did not belong taking at all, but the Visine she didn't take voluntarily. That we know somebody snuck into her drink. Now, how can you possibly know that? Such a strong point. I feel like that's a very strong point by the defense. And the evidence is going to show that some of these pills could kill people. They're able to kill people. Some of these other prescription pills that she had in her system. Now, also, another fact in this case is that Lynn was very sick before she died. She put on an extra 100 pounds, and the neighbors are testifying that she was living much more secluded at the end of her life. She didn't want to meet with people. She didn't want people coming over. She was becoming depressed. She was acting depressed. She was sick. She was back and forth to the different hospitals, to the different doctors. Now, another point. If Jessy was the one who staged this crime scene, according to the medical examiner, it was staged. The crime scene was staged. And who could have been staged by? They're pointing the finger to Jessy. Now, if this was staged, which means Jessy knew exactly what she was doing, she wanted to stage a suicide. If that's what Jessy really wanted to do, then why, when the detectives first asked her, do you think this was a suicide? Why wouldn't she say, yes, of course it's a suicide? What else do you think it is? And I'm so sad that is. And pretend that you're sad that your mother committed suicide. But instead, she said, "No, I don't think that she would leave her cats. I don't really know. I can't tell you for sure if it was a suicide or not." Hello, if you're the one staging the crime scene to make it look like a suicide, and that's your alibi here, don't you think that you would tell the detectives right away this was a suicide? And yet she didn't do that. Now, also another very strong point is that there's going to be documentation that shows that Lynn actually applied for a loan in this case. Lynn applied for a loan after all these spending sprees by Jessy. Now, why would Lynn be applying for a loan if she didn't realize that she gave Jessy the money? If she knew that she gave Jessy the money, then it makes sense that she would apply for a loan. But if she thinks that she's sitting on $150,000, why would she apply for a loan for $30,000? Why in the world would she do that? That doesn't make any sense. So great points. I think that these are great points by the defense, and that's why there's one part that the defense really did not talk about, and that is, what about those searches on the phone? What were those searches being done for? Who did those searches? Are you going to suggest to me that Lynn, who hates technology, one day took Jessy's phone and started searching this to see how she can commit suicide? I mean, that could be a plausible explanation, but it's hard to swallow because we know that Lynn did not like technology. She only had her flip phone. Is it possible, and this is just another theory I'm pulling out of my hat, is it possible that Jessy actually was helping Lynn commit suicide, and Lynn asked Jessy how can she commit suicide, and Jessy was helping her? That's possible. I guess that's a possible theory. But I think that this point, this piece of evidence about the searches for how to poison somebody, that may be the determining factor here. That may cause the jury to believe the prosecution's theory instead of the defense's theory. But again, we don't know, and I'm not going to be silly enough to tell you that that's my guess in this case. Nobody knows what the jury's going to do, but I'm just looking at all this information in front of me, and I think that may be the strongest point by the prosecution, as opposed to all the other pieces of evidence that they said that they put forth. So we will see how the case comes out. We should be going to closing shortly, and then we will get a verdict. Thanks again for watching. Please, if you haven't yet, subscribe and like the video so we can continue growing. See you next time.